So I was rejected from many apartments because I was a foreigner.
The reason I came here was more of a spiritual reason.
Like, I feel like people don't take me seriously and things like that.
Can you briefly introduce yourself?
All right. Hi, my name is Maya. I also go by Soft Goth, and I'm from America.
Hi, I'm Ali. I live in Tokyo, but I'm originally from the UK, and I've been here for 7 years.
My name is Zach. I'm originally from Florida, living in Japan now for 6 years.
What do you do for a living?
When I first came here, I was just studying Japanese, the language, and then I got scouted as a model. So now, for the past 8 months, I've been here working as a model full time.
I do YouTube, so I have a YouTube channel and I explore various assets of life in Japan, culture, and also interviewing some people who have also decided to come and live here.
And how has that experience been for you so far?
So far, like most people who live in Japan will tell you that it's kind of an up and down experience. The first year or two are pretty great because everything is amazing and new. And maybe third or fourth year, you start to see Japan isn't the easiest country to live in. But by the fifth year, you tend to stay because it's comfortable.
What's it like living as a foreigner in Tokyo, Japan?
There's a lot of good things about it. There's a lot of bad things about it. I think like some of the good things, I feel like you kind of encounter like the most open-minded people that you like possibly could here. And I feel like once you get involved with that culture and stuff like that, like you see like a side of Tokyo that like a lot of people who live here full time don't even get to experience. So I feel like you have like a really unique like view into, what it is to be here. There are like simple bad things about it, like the normal people, the people outside of that scene kind of like look at you funny, they stare at you everywhere you go and stuff like that. But like generally it's not super bad or whatever, and like working as a model, like clearly you're like a little bit different, and I feel like you kind of see people who appreciate that difference in you a lot.
I mean, I think it's very comfortable. I think a lot of people have said, how clean and safe and all these other amazing things about life in Japan. I'll also say that there's lots of opportunities for growth. I think that's kind of one of the reasons that I came here. Just going into a culture that's so very different from my own. And just kind of learning every day. I feel like I'm still learning every day, even though I've been here for 7 years.
Well, in the last 3 years, it's been kind of closed off from foreigners. So we were kind of secluded since, I guess, like 2020 or so when Japan closed from Corona. So it's been, a bit of a mixed experience, being that there were less foreigners. A lot of people felt maybe special. Everyone was always, other Japanese people were always surprised when they saw foreigners. They're like, oh, where you come from, and then you kind of get that, fun experience. But now that everyone's back, it's quite crowded in Tokyo. So, but in general, it's been good. I mean, Japanese people are quite kind and usually quite polite, and food is tasty here, and never had any serious issues living here.
What would you say, like the downsides are living in Tokyo as a foreigner is?
I think a lot of the downsides have to do with like how people perceive me and stuff like that. Like I feel like people don't take me seriously and things like that. A, as a foreigner, B, as like a woman living here, like I feel like people talk down on me a lot and things like that I like don't quite experience like in New York and things like that. But like it hasn't been super like overt or whatever where it's like in your face or whatever. I feel like Japanese people it's like a really subtle culture. So I feel like if you come here to visit, you wouldn't notice it. But like after you're living here for a while, like I feel like you start to feel like the discrimination a little bit.
You've been staying like in Tokyo for 7 years. So like how was Tokyo back then and how is Tokyo now?
It's kind of difficult because I think like I've changed, I've adapted, and I've kind of gotten used to life here. I mean, of course, there's always like building work being done, but it's always adapting, it's always changing. I guess like my time here has been interrupted by Corona. So during that time where I think a lot more foreigners could have been here and stuff like that, there was no foreigners here, except for foreigners living here. And I think a lot at that time, many foreigners went back. I don't really feel like the city's changed. I feel like I've changed through my time here.
Would you say, like Japanese people are welcoming to foreigners?
Yeah, I think the thing is interesting about Japanese people is they tend to, I guess they want to maintain that polite face. So sometimes if they can't speak good English, they might be too shy to speak to you. I think some people might confuse that for maybe discrimination, but usually Japanese people just are scared to mess up speaking to you. I will say there are challenges as a foreigner, like things like finding an apartment. So that's pretty hard because a lot of Japanese renters don't want to rent out to foreigners because foreigners tend not to follow the rules as much as Japanese citizens do, or maybe they'll break the lease early and leave. So it took me maybe around 6 to 8 months to find an apartment. So certain things like that can be a little bit difficult, but I do find that Japan is pretty accommodating to foreigners, especially Tokyo, where there's a lot of English. All the signs are in English, and most staff can speak English.
I'm sure there are some people who don't agree with what I'm going to say, but I feel that generally Japanese people are very kind, very courteous, and it's often not so much about like where you're from. It's kind of like, are you a good person and do you follow the rules? I think that's quite an important thing for foreigners to know. It's like, it's a very rule-based society, and in some ways it can be frustrating, but at other times it keeps a certain peace. It keeps a certain like system going.
Yeah, you just been mentioned earlier and asked like people not taking you seriously. So like, would that be like in a dating scene or just like general daily life?
Um, yeah, actually, like in dating, yeah, that happens. I feel like in daily life, it happens too. Like, I feel like I'll say something or whatever, and like my Japanese friend will say the same thing, and nobody will believe me until the Japanese person says it. It's like, I said the same thing. Like, you could have just trusted me or whatever. But yeah, you don't get taken seriously in the dating scene as well. Like, I feel like people kind of see you as like a transient, like, oh, you're not going to be here for a long time or whatever. So like, I can say whatever, I can do whatever. And like, it's not like that or whatever. And I feel like a lot of people here don't get that or whatever, or they rely on like stereotypes when they like date you or whatever and things like that. And like, instead of like getting to know who you are as a person, like that's quite common as well.
You made mention earlier on about like the discrimination.
Yeah, yeah,
So can
yeah.
you like elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So, I mean, I think everyone has different experiences, and especially in Japanese society, as a result of like marketing and maybe Japan's relationship with the West, there's maybe I don't want to say hierarchy, but a certain level of who would be more discriminated against than other people within, I guess, within race and where people come from. So, Japanese people tend to really idolize maybe like, I guess, like, Paris, France is a beautiful place to them. So if they meet a French person, they might have, positive perceptions of what French people are like and what they are. So they might treat them very well. Whereas maybe someone who is from like Philippines, their perception might be, okay, Philippine people are here to be, to work, because a lot of them do tend to come over from Philippines and take up, kind of like blue collar jobs and such. So it really does depend on what your background is.
Is there like any discrimination law going on in the country?
I mean, some of the biggest issues I would say is that, so like I was mentioning earlier, Japanese like apartment owners and homeowners can discriminate against foreigners. There's no law against them from saying no to you just because you're a foreigner. So I was rejected from many apartments because I was a foreigner. There's also a lot of issues with kind of like when a non-Japanese person marries a Japanese person and they have kids, a lot of times usually the wives will take the kids and run back to Japan, and there's really nothing that the husbands can do to get their kids back.
Are Japanese open to like having foreign friends?
Yeah, they are, like, really unexpectedly. Like, in my job and in my work and stuff like that, I often work with, like, Japanese people, and I feel like they're really open to, like, talk to me and, like, be friendly and things like that. Even, like, demographics of Japanese people you wouldn't expect. Like, oftentimes I work with, like, extras, and a lot of times it'll be, like, really old Japanese people that ends up being, like, the friendliest and stuff like that, whereas I feel like you have the stereotype in your mind that, like, oh, older people are going to be more closed off. Oftentimes, like, that's not the case. And I feel like there are places in Japan you can go specifically where like a lot of foreigners kind of congregate, and a lot of Japanese people trying to learn English will go to. So you kind of know that those people there are like going to be open to receiving you and like making friends with you and stuff like that.
Why Japan though?
Yeah, really good question. Something that I didn't know the answer to until, like now, to be honest. I think it was more like the reason that I came here was more of a spiritual reason. My life in the UK was completely fine. Everything was fine. I had a good job and friends and all that. But I just knew that something was missing, and I wouldn't really be satisfied until I found it, I think. So I came to a culture that I've always thought was very beautiful and had some mysterious points about it, but also something that really like connected in my spirit. And then over time I kind of found myself a little bit more and got married, and yeah, now I, I guess I see my life here. So
What is it like, working at a Japanese company as a foreigner?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so depending on how domestic your company is, the layout and the hierarchy of, I guess, the kind of corporate stature will change. So for my company, we're pretty flat. So you can speak directly to the president if you want to. You can talk to your managers directly if you want to. So, but in most Japanese companies that are very domestic, you can't really just talk to, the president of the sacho. You have to work your way up the ladder, and there's a lot of bureaucracy. And people always joke that there's meetings about why we have so many meetings, and we should have more meetings to figure out what these meetings are all about. So within Japanese companies, there is a lot of wasted time. So that would be definitely one of the negative points. But yeah, there's a lot of respect within Japanese company. There's a lot less, I guess, maybe politics in some Japanese companies, but there is still that bureaucracy too.
What advice would you give to foreigners wanting to come into Japan?
I feel like my advice is to come here with an open mind. I feel like my advice is to come here willing to try a lot of different things, because I feel like it's super easy to like get caught in a rut. I feel like it's really easy to get stuck in one neighborhood. There's so many different things I think to like see and explore and to like do and stuff like that. I feel like my main advice is to do a lot of research, like know what you want to see and like go to those areas. And I feel like go off the beaten path a little bit too, like try to talk to Japanese people who might, be able to recommend you something a little bit strange, a little bit weird, because I feel like that's how you get like the authentic experience of the city, is to go to places maybe that tourists do go just to get that experience, but then also to go off the beaten path and to do things that, aren't so common knowledge.
rules like kind of keep the society stuck together, and it might seem frustrating, like why do people have to do that, or why do I have to do that? But it's kind of like it just keeps it running and it keeps it smooth. And even though the rules might not seem to make sense, they do keep this harmony, and that's why living in Japan is so enjoyable and so safe and everything like that. So yeah, stick to the rules, even if they don't make sense. It's just sort of like what keeps society together.
I would definitely pick up Japanese before you come to Japan, because once you get to Japan and you start working, it's really hard to practice Japanese while living here and kind of running your life. So if your goal is to eventually live here, definitely learn at least conversational Japanese first, and then you can move here. And a lot of people do come here originally as English teachers, but there are a lot of other opportunities as well, whether you do like sales or consulting or engineers. And Japan has a huge shortage of like IT specialists. So if you're like in the IT area, then there's definitely opportunity for you there too.